Welcome to PWS United, a podcast for the Prader-Willi syndrome community, brought to you by PWSA USA. This podcast gives the latest news in research, advocacy, and family support by bringing together staff, volunteers, PWS treatment specialists, biotech and pharmaceutical representatives, caregivers, family members, and individuals with PWS. Our goal is to share education, awareness, and resources with those living with PWS and their supporters. Join us in our mission to enhance the quality of life and empower those affected by Prader-Willi syndrome.
I am Dorothea Lantz. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at PWSA USA and a proud parent to Hunter, who is 8 years old in this PWS community. In this episode of PWSA's podcast, we are sitting down with siblings of people that are living with Prader-Willi syndrome to explore what sibling advocacy looks like. And that's at the kitchen table, at the school, or maybe even at the State House in IEP meetings, clinic visits, and just basically everyday moments that change how a community shows up. And today I'm joined by Henry McDonald. Henry, how old are you?
I am 14 last I checked.
And your sister Josie is how old?
She's 7.
And she's living with PWS, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So, just a quick note for anyone who might be listening today, this conversation may touch on some sensitive topics like medical experiences or challenging behaviors. So, just please take care while listening and decide whether or not it's appropriate for your young ones to also listen to. And with that, we're just gonna jump in. So, Henry, I'm gonna start at the beginning here. Can you just I'd like, before we start talking about your sibling, I'd like to hear a little bit about who you are. You're the oldest, right? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then kind of maybe a little bit about Josie and the relationship that you all have.
Like you mentioned, we mentioned, I'm 14 years old. I am currently in 8th grade, and so that means I'm getting ready for high school, all of that. So that's exciting, bit scary, but also exciting. I'm very into theater and also script writing. I'm working on a script of my own currently. So that is very fun. In terms of Josie, she's very fun, She's always smiling, she's always lighting up the room, and she's always just generally kind to everyone and kinda like a duo in a way, so that's great. We always team up in a way.
The dynamic duo.
Yeah, like Batman and Robin.
I love that. When, if you can think back and kind of think about, like, when was the earliest memory that you had of realizing that PWS, even if you weren't sure what PWS was, like, when did you realize that this was kind of part of your story and your family's story?
Well, I think that would probably be, I don't remember how old I was at the time, but I remember it was around Halloween time, and we were talking about Halloween. It was kind of a family thing. We were like, it wasn't like a meeting or anything, but we were like discussing costumes, where we're gonna go, all that fun stuff. And I brought up the topic of candy, and then that's when my mother informed me of the how the PWS condition affects the stomach and all that stuff and hyperphagia. She didn't dump it all on me because I was young at the time, but that's when she first told me about that stuff, and that's when I didn't know it then, but, like, that's kind of when the realization point that I realized this was a serious thing.
So when you talk to people and you hear other people talk about either rare disease or PWS, what do you wish that people understood about PWS that often goes missing?
I think it is kind of that point of how it doesn't just affect the child, and it even doesn't just affect the parents. It does affect, like, the siblings and the family friends and the cousins and everyone involved. And I also think that's why an episode like this is just so important, is because of that, and like spreading awareness that it is like it affects everyone in the space, and sometimes it can even affect the community, like in school, and just everywhere that's involved with that child.
Okay. I totally get that. So you spoke a little bit about that Halloween moment being the moment that when you started to realize that this was something that was really important. So and you were younger when that happened. So as you've as you've gotten older, how has your understanding of the disease and your perspective on it changed?
Well, I think my understanding has kinda always stayed the same, like, I've gained more information, obviously, but I think in terms of how I deal with it, I don't know how to describe it, but I think it's definitely hard sometimes, and I think that's true for anyone involved. But it's really about appreciating those little moments in between where it's almost like you forget in a way about PWS and you just like see a child or an adult even sometimes.
Henry, do you have one of those little moments that you might be able to remember or think of and share with our listeners today?
Um, I
Not to
don't
put
think I
not to put you on the spot.
it's okay. I don't think I have one in particular, but I feel like even every time I'm like make eye contact with Josephine, I think it's always almost magical, like we're talking without words in a way.
So I just have to tell you that, my son is 8, so he's really close in age with Josie. And he's nonverbal. So what you just said with that almost being able to communicate without words through eye contact, and it's like that magical moment. It really resonates with me, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of our families. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything that you have felt that people misunderstand the most when it comes to PWS that you would kind of like to make sure that people recognize and perhaps change their thinking on?
I think for the most part, I'm not really per se as involved in the PWS community as, say, you or my mom. So I don't really get to see how people act in a space where everyone knows about it. And then there are those like miscommunications. But I think that also kind of says something about how it really is a rare disease, and I can't really be in an environment where there is misinformation about it because there's not really information about it at all.
Wow. I think we could probably spend the rest of the podcast just talking about that. That's huge. Because in the world of, over 10,000 rare diseases, that's 30 million Americans. And we could talk about rare diseases from here to forever. That's an incredible point, Henry. Thank you. And super insightful. So I want to talk a little bit about your advocacy as a sibling. And I know that your mom, Melanie, was really proud. She's always extremely proud of you. And she's always sharing some just incredible moments of you, especially as you're going through these theatrical experiences. And as a theater kid myself, it makes me so happy to see everything that you're doing. And the fact that you're writing a script, which we're going to talk about in a minute, just warms my heart, and I know that it would warm my husband's heart too, who is also a theater buff. But I know that this last year you had an opportunity to really begin advocating as a sibling for Josie, who's living with PWS. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you? What was it that you did? How did it make you feel? And is it maybe something that you would think about doing again?
I recently went to I don't remember where it was, honestly, but I went to this political place and we went with this very nice man and we just like discussed how PWS and other rare diseases affect like an area like just like any area. And it was very eye-opening for me because in a way I had always seen all the rare diseases as separate and kind of like we were all on our own. But when I met with not just PWS families, but also other families dealing with other rare diseases, it was like I almost realized for the first time that we were kinda all on the same team, and there was no reason for us to be separate because we can all advocate together, and then instead of 14,000 people in the US where suddenly I don't know what number you said, was it 30,000,000?
30 million Americans. So it's one out of every 10 Americans are
Yeah,
living with the rare disease. So it's about 30 million Americans
thank you.
estimated.
So yeah. So clearly it becomes a much louder voice, and I think that's really essential for getting across what we wanna get across, and I think that it was very helpful to have a lot of perspectives there, and that's why my voice felt important in a way, at least in my mind. And I think I would definitely do it again if an opportunity like that presented itself, just because of like how I felt I impacted it and who I represent.
Well, I can tell you as a parent, and I can also, tell you as someone who works with your mom and what we've heard about your advocacy experience that we really hope you do it again because it was impactful. And it's really important that the siblings in our community are able to share their perspective because, as parents, we can share our perspective of a journey and people with PWS can share their perspective of the journey. It's really important that we continue to hear from people who are impacted from this journey in other ways, just other than parents or individuals. Siblings are as equally as important in this story. It changes everyone's lives. And you're right, right? When you realize that rare disease affects one out of every 10 people, you suddenly realize that, yeah, we might be in this PWS journey, which seems really small. But when we all get together, we're a really big voice and we're all working towards really similar goals. So Henry, it's incredible that at the age of 14, that you are so in tune with what this environment already looks like. And it gives me a lot of hope for our generation coming up. So thank you for that. And with that, I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about some school issues. Now, I know that you're in 8th grade, is that correct?
That is right, yeah.
Okay. So you're finishing middle school and will probably be starting high school next year?
That's the hope.
Okay. And so Josie's in elementary school, right?
Mhm.
So you guys have you ever been in school together, in the same school together?
No, we have not, actually.
So, have you had an opportunity to talk to any of your friends at school about the experience that you have with PWS or rare disease? If you have, like, what's been the reaction there, and like, what does that interaction look like?
To be honest, it hasn't really come up much, but a lot of my classmates have met Josie, and it's almost like they don't even question it. I mean, it's hard for me to see what's going on in their mind, but at the very least, they're very understanding of it. And while they don't exactly know what it is, they are very open. And Josie always loves them, and they always love Josie. And I think that's very nice.
Have you ever had to explain to any of your friends like what PWS is, or they're just super accepting of it, and it's like no worries?
For the most part, it's yeah, no worries, unless I've, like, had someone over consistently, and then we'll just, like, explain we won't go in depth, but we'll just explain the general basics, mostly food safety, just for Josie, so we don't, like, risk endangerment of that kind.
I get that. I'm going to move on just a little bit and I'm going to talk a little bit about healthcare because we know that people with PWS there's a lot of medical appointments, there's a lot of therapy appointments, and I feel like it's very easy for a family schedule to revolve around this one individual and all of their needs. Have you had to be a part of a lot of scheduling requirements for Josie's therapy appointments or doctor appointments or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a long point where I was, like, going to every therapy meeting, and I was, a big part of that. And there was even a point where Josie's physical therapist and speech therapist like came here because it was so hard to schedule things. But recently, I've like no longer been attending those just because I've been growing older, and so my mom trusts me more around the house. And it's not like it was something where I was there and I was hands on. It was just me like being there. I wasn't really needed.
But you had to be there, right? Because you couldn't be home alone, right? And there had to be you had to be with someone. So did being a part of that kind of a rigorous appointment schedule ever affect things that you wanted to do?
Well, it did annoy me a lot, and it was very hard because I did have to go from it was on a weekend, so I did have to go from therapy on Saturday, and then I had other commitments on Sunday for a long time, but I don't have those anymore either. But yeah, it was very rigorous per se, and but I think if it came between me having less free time on Saturdays and Josie getting the help she needs, I would have less free time on Saturdays every time, because if it's what she needs, then it's what she needs, and I'm willing to do that.
So is it safe to say that, since a really young age, you've sacrificed, part of your own needs to make sure that your sister gets what she needs?
I think that's safe to say, but I also believe that that's true for a lot of people involved with a PWS family member or friend, especially once you get really close to that person.
Right. Henry, you're an incredible young man. Can you talk a little bit about how this PWS dynamic has shaped your family? Like routines, are things harder than you thought they would be? Like what does food security look like? Like what does a day-to-day situation look like in your house where you think it might be different um, if you weren't dealing with PWS, or is it better or is it worse?
It is a bit of a different schedule. Like, there are some restrictions, like, for example, we can't really, like, go anywhere too late because Josie has to, like, go to sleep and all that stuff. We need to tuck her in, but that's kind of the same with any young child. So in terms of food security, I think we're very lucky in the fact that we don't have to worry about that too much. Josie's a very curious child, and that could have been bad for us, but normally it just means she's too busy making mischief somewhere else to worry about getting into the fridge or the pantry. Even if she were to, most of our easily accessible food is like in a bag or wrapped up, so it is like harder for her if she were to, but at least from my recollection, we don't have any experiences with needing food security as much as other families might, which we're very grateful for.
I think I'm going to take that quote, making mischief somewhere else. Too busy making mischief somewhere else. I love that. That's great. So that's a good place to be. So do you ever think, based on where you are in this PWS journey, and of course it looks different for everyone, and there's no right or wrong answer here. Okay. Do you ever feel pressure as the oldest to be kind of the strong one, or, a second or a third parent, or as Josie's older brother? Like what does that feel like? And I know that as I have a younger brother, and I know that, I'm one of four, but even with my younger brother, I'm super protective of him and have always felt the need to be there and make sure that he's safe and okay. What does that look like for you as Josie's older brother?
Well, I think for the most part, yeah, I do feel like sometimes I'm put in that second parent kind of position. And I think sometimes you just have to deal with that and make the most of it. And as a part of that, I am sometimes treated as a second parent in the way that I'm helping making decisions for Josie and what would be best for her. Obviously, I don't have, like, the same authority, but if my mom needs a second opinion or she just feels like for whatever reason she needs my help, I'm always there when I can be. And sometimes it's just watching Josie while she's in a meeting like this one. Sometimes that's just needed, and it is also kind of a bonding time for me and Josie sometimes where we'll, like, watch a movie or something, and yeah, just something like that.
So thinking about that, where do you feel like it's important? And especially now that you're getting older, right? You're in like key teenage transition years. Where do you feel like it's important to draw your own boundaries and protect yourself and your privacy and your time and your mental health? And how do you do that now?
I believe that's a very hard landscape to operate on its own. I think it's very rigorous finding that balance, but I'm very lucky to have, like, it at the point where it's not too much for me, and but I do see how a younger, older sibling or someone who's an older sibling but older than me and has less time, maybe they're, like, working on high school a lot or whatever older kids do, I could see how that could be very stressful. And so I think the key to that is really communication with those other people that need you, that mom or that dad or whoever needs you, and not in that moment, but just consistently and communicating with them to find a good way to balance your life and their life and this sibling's life and your life together as a family.
Henry, you are mature, be way beyond your years. It's incredible to speak with you. When your mom came to you and said, "Hey, we have an opportunity for you to meet with a lawmaker and kind of talk a little bit about what it's like to be a sibling to someone who's living with Prader-Willi syndrome, etc." How did you decide that that was something that you wanted to do and were willing to do? And what were your first thoughts, going into that?
Well, my first thoughts were not positive, to be honest. I thought it was going to be me in this big meeting room with all these chairs, and it was going to be all these smart people who knew all these things, and I was just gonna be sitting there in the corner, bored out of my mind, and just wishing I could be absolutely anywhere else and not have to wear these fancy clothes and all that jazz. But I didn't want to say no, to be honest, and I figured I'm always there to support my sister, and so even if it's something, even if it's an event like this that I think I'm gonna absolutely hate, I might as well go for Josie's sake, and if it sucks, I can say no next time. But I did end up going, and it was completely different from what I thought it was. So, like, I kind of described it earlier, we met with these people, and I think my voice was really heard and important.
Because
So,
because it is. It is being heard and it is important. So thank you. I just wanted to put you on the spot now that we've had a little more time to talk. So like
thank
sorry.
you.
Sorry for making you do that again. So I want to be really candid here and I want you to know that this is a safe space for you to say whatever you're feeling. As you think about what Josie's future might look like and what you hope your future might look like, do you have any thoughts on, as a family, what her future might hold and what your role might look like in that future? And there is no right or wrong answer to this. Okay.
I think that's a really scary topic to touch on, not just for me or my family, but for a lot of PWS families, dare I say most. But I think we all like to be hopeful on it and look and hope it's the best outcome. And I think sometimes that's just the best we can do. And sometimes we're less fortunate, and that's not how it works out. And sometimes we are more fortunate. I think scary to look towards, and I think my role as an older sibling could look like a lot of things depending on what happens in the future. I might need to provide more hands-on care. I might need to help pay for Josie to live in a place that can take care of her. And I might just need to be there to support my sister and the rest of my family in dealing with PWS and other things.
That's fair. So when we first started speaking, you mentioned that you were working on a script. Can you tell us a little bit about what that script is about, if you are at all inclined to, or if you know, or if you need to keep it a secret, that's fine. But I'd love to hear about the script because I've seen some of your work already, and I'd be really excited to see something that you've produced.
Well, I've just started it. So I have got like probably 4 scenes. And so I'm always a bit embarrassed to talk about it because when I explain it, it sounds really cringy. And it is kind of cringy, but it's mine and I love it. It's my little baby. I don't know how to touch on it too much. It is a superhero story. I'm very nerdy and like superheroes. Um,
I think we all like superheroes, and I think in Josie's world, you're probably her superhero. So it's fair. Okay, so we're gonna do some rapid fire stuff.
all right,
I'm gonna ask you questions one by one. One myth about PWS that you'd bust in a sentence.
that's a tough one. I think that kind of goes back to an earlier question you asked me. I think I'm not really in a space where I know a lot of myths about PWS, so it's hard for me to answer something like that.
What about all people with PWS are overweight? Josie looks fantastic.
Yeah,
She's in great shape, right?
yeah.
Okay, that's my myth. Okay. What is a boundary, whether you put it in place, your parents put it in place, or circumstances put it in place? What is a boundary that changed your life for the better?
I think that comes with the hyperphagia and how that changes in a lot of cases, not just the child with PWS's diet, but the whole family's diet. And while I'm not on the same diet that my sister's on in terms of what I can and can't have, I think me and my family have definitely started eating healthier because of her.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. Okay, you've done some advocacy work now with an elected official. I'm not sure how familiar you are with policy, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. We can cut it out if it doesn't make sense. But if there is a policy change that you could make tomorrow, what would that be?
I'll be honest, I don't know much about politics. So,
Good for you. Good for you. A more important question: what's your favorite? Like when you think about your sister, what's what's your favorite moment that you think of? What's your favorite moment with her?
I don't know if I really have a favorite, but I actually have this school assignment that Josie made that my mother recently showed me. I have it in my hands. I think she made this today, actually. It looks like an assignment about things she wants her teacher to know. It says, "To my teacher, 3 things I want you to know." So it has these prompts. So the first one is "I am," and then she wrote, or might have been her helper, wrote "happy." And then it says, "I can play with my brother, and I have a dog." And I think that immediately put a big smile on my face. So, something like that is really an awesome moment, even though we were miles away at the time she was making it, probably. I think that's a nice moment, at least for me.
Okay, last question. If you had one word for what sibling advocacy means to you, and I know I'm asking for one word, but it can obviously be more than one. What is that? And is there a story behind it?
I guess the first word that came to mind is important, but I know that's kind of vague, but it really is important. And whether that's for PWS or changing policies of any kind or anything that you want to speak up on, that you want to bring attention to. And that could be something as small as it's contained inside your school, or it could be a global issue. I think that's really important. And I think that's shaped the world around us, like the world as we know it today. And I don't think it's going to stop doing that for anything or anyone.
Right. I think you're right, Henry, and I hope you are. So before we finish up, is there anything else that you'd like to add completely on your own? It could be about advocacy, it could be about a sibling, it could be just about you. Anything else you want to add?
I'd say that kind of what we touched on earlier in the episode, that things like this, whether like going to places and advocating or even like podcast episodes, things like this are really important for spreading any message or awareness of any kind. And I think that it's great what you're doing here for PWS. And I hope that more things like this, or just in general with this goal in mind for PWS or other rare diseases or other issues in the world, could really like sprout up and spread messages that they want to spread and go in depth on things like this and share all these perspectives. I think that'd be great. And I really hope we can progress towards that as a society.
We're changing the world, Henry, one podcast at a time.
That's cool. Can I write that down in my quotes?
Thank you for listening to this episode of PWS United. If you want to learn more about Prader-Willi syndrome and how PWSA USA is making strides in advocacy, family support, and research, visit www.pwsausa.org. And while you're there, we encourage you to sign up for our Pulse email newsletter to stay informed about the latest news, resources, and events. Don't forget to subscribe to the PWS United podcast so you never miss an episode. Our team is always available to support families and their loved ones living with PWS 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can call us at 941-312-0400 or email info@pwsausa.org. Catch a new episode next Tuesday, and until then, have a great week.